Hello and good afternoon. I'm Matt Perkins. I'm with LISC. First of all, I want to thank you for joining our session. And normally it would be the moderator up here starting things off, but we have a special moderator today, one we want to particularly acknowledge and thank for the ability for all of us to come together and do the work in so many cases. Moderating this session will be Carlton Moore, Director of the Bureau of Justice Assistance. President Biden, on February 28th, 2022, appointed Carlton Moore as Director of the Bureau of Justice Assistance. Prior to joining BJA, Carlton served as the Executive Director of Ohio's Office of Criminal Justice Services, where he oversaw state and federal grants for law enforcement, victim assistance, juvenile justice, crime prevention courts, anti-trafficking efforts, reentry, corrections programs, and traffic safety. That's it. In that role, he led Ohio's grant-making operations, advising the governor and the director of the Department of Public Safety on criminal justice strategies. He also served as the facilitator for former Ohio Governor John Kasich's task force on community police relations, precursor of the Ohio Collaborative Community Policing Advisory Board, a multidisciplinary panel that establishes standards for law enforcement agencies as part of the state's effort to strengthen community police relations. Carlton also served on the National Criminal Justice Association Advisory Council and Executive Committee and was president of NCJA's Board of Directors. He also served on the steering committee of the Justice Counts Initiative. So please join me in thanking Director Moore.
All right, good afternoon. All right, thank you to the 4 people who responded. I appreciate that a great deal. What a day it has been. Let me thank Matt for that introduction and the entire LISC team. They're such a, despite the fact that LISC is a challenging word to say, they are an incredibly helpful team, and we depend on them a great deal. So thank you to, I see a few of the LISC people who are here. So thank you for all of your work. But, I was saying what a day it has been. I mean, it has been an incredibly impressive day. And you can feel the energy, like I felt the energy all morning into the afternoon. It's odd that there's so much energy in the room and so little heat, because it is so cold in this room. I think some of the kitchen people were like putting food out here, just putting up steaks and stuff that they could just hang here for a little bit. But it has been an incredible day. I mean, it started from the very beginning with Eddie and his speech and the Attorney General and the energy from the Attorney General. I've seen the Attorney General several times, I've seen him give speeches several times and in several different types of settings. And you could see the energy that he had. He's really energized by being here. And I share the excitement that he had and the sentiment that he had last year with saying to himself, I'm going to go back next year. And I felt the exact same way. I think me and our entire team at BJA have been looking forward to this conference since we left last year's conference. But the thing that I will really take away, if you told me that the Attorney General, that Merrick Garland would say Wu-Tang Clan, I would have wondered what you were talking about, but we did see that. I'll stop with the jokes. Let me get into what we are here for. So far today, we have heard an awful lot about the individual work of CVI groups across the country, and it's been incredibly inspiring. And I hope you have been as moved as I have been, and that you can feel the support in the room for this work. And I think it's incredibly important that folks feel supported by the Department of Justice. But I also want to point out that there are more and more states who are making investments into this work and developing agencies or offices in order to support this work, along with municipal agencies and county agencies, which is incredibly important. There are things that state agencies can do and the capacity that they have that just make them so necessary to be a part of the overall CVIPI infrastructure. And so we're going to have an opportunity to hear from several states about some of the work that they are doing in order to support this initiative. Now, there are official things that states can do, and I think back to my time in Ohio, from making investments to having convenings and things like that. But there are other ways that states support this work and can support work, especially things that are different from what government is used to investing in. I can remember I had a meeting once. I had gone to a conference, saw a presentation on a specific type of intervention, and I decided, we really need to do this in Ohio. We need to, because they're saving lives in other parts of this country. We need to be able to save lives here in Ohio as well. And there was a community in Ohio, with Cincinnati, who had already started down this path, and they were really interested in doing this work. And but they had they had built a pretty sizable collaboration, but it was kind of teetering. Will we go forward? Will we not? So I came back from this conference. I decided I want to host this meeting. I invite a number of cities from across our state to come to a meeting. Cincinnati comes along to this meeting as well. So Cincinnati decides they want to have another meeting, a meeting before the meeting, right? I love when people, it's like one meeting's not enough, like a meeting before the meeting. So we did. We had a meeting before the meeting. And I really got to see how how some people were really committed to this, some people were really listening, some people were not sold on it at all. And so I had a chance to talk to them about what I'd seen, things I'd heard from around the country, talking to some of my colleagues around the country. And I do want to point out, since Chris Asplin is here, it was an NCJA conference that I was attending. It was the NCJA conference in Baltimore that I was attending and wanted to share this with folks. So it's not until years later. So anyway, Cincinnati goes ahead, they do this, they have a 67% reduction in homicides during the first year. They actually go about 3 months without a single homicide. It's not until years later that I find out that the chief at that time was not supportive of this. And it wasn't until he sat in that meeting and understood that the state was supportive of this work that finally he decided this is a direction that we need to go in. And states have that ability. Sometimes the thing that you can do more than anything else, if you don't have a grant to give, if you don't have a conference to plan, is just to stand with people as they try new things and to be there for them. And that matters to people. So we're going to have a chance today to hear about what is going on in 3 states, Illinois, New York, and Pennsylvania, to support community-led violence intervention. We're going to start. Let me introduce Del Reese Adams. Del Reese is the Executive Director of Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority, and she is a fellow SAA. I'm still an SAA, just of the biggest state in the country, right? That's how I look at it. But she is a justice warrior with over 25 years of directing social service and public health reform efforts. On January 4th, 2020, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker appointed Del Reese to lead the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority, better known as ICJIA. I think it might just be easier to say Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority. ICJIA spearheads and informs on public safety policies, research, and best practices. In this role, Executive Director Adams leverages her expertise in criminal justice, violence prevention, and racial equity to support the agency's work. And next, I will introduce Damon Baycoat, He's the Deputy Commissioner for the Office of Youth Justice, New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services. As the Deputy Commissioner, Mr. Baycoat oversees and manages the Office of Youth Justice. OYJ is an office that focuses its work in several different areas, including gang violence, reducing racial and ethnic disparities, mind, science of bias, trauma, healing, and behavioral health, prevention, school diversion, youth violence, police and community partnerships, rural specific issues, youth with sexual behavior problems, gender responsiveness, LGBTQ issues, restorative practice. Man, I'm going to do a list of things he doesn't do. Before his current role, Mr. Baycoat was the Director of Training for the New York State SNUG program and worked in community-based programs ranging from gang prevention to workforce development. Next is Kerwin Henderson. He is the Senior Justice Technical Assistant Specialist at West Ed. Kerwin Henderson is he specializes in technical assistance in violence prevention and reform of justice systems. Kerwin has over 10 years of experience addressing critical issues and implementing reforms across the criminal justice system. He has managed the implementation of evidence-based programs and practices in juvenile and adult justice systems and addressed issues in reentry, including race and gender disparities in treatment. At national and international conferences, Kerwin has presented on juvenile justice and the issues of military veterans. He has also worked directly with state and local leaders to improve decision-making and reduce incarcerated populations. And finally, Lori Toscano is the Director of Justice Technical Assistance at West Ed, where she works, where her areas of expertise include technical assistance, training development, program development and implementation, strategic development, and systems change. Toscano has over 20 years of experience in community-based violence prevention and intervention. Toscano is part of a West Ed team to provide a blueprint for local jurisdictions to prioritize, plan, and evaluate strategies to reduce current violence, prevent future violence, and co-create a sustainable system that improves outcomes for communities. And with that, we're out of time. So I want to thank everyone for coming. It's been a pleasure to see everyone. No, I was thinking, I don't know if anyone's ever seen that, what's up with that, but that's kind of what I was thinking about. But we're going to have our first presentation is from Director Adams. She'll have 10 minutes to present. Director Adams.
Thank you so much, Director Moore, and it is an honor and a pleasure to be on this panel and to definitely be introduced and moderated by Director Moore. As he mentioned, really spearheaded a lot of the great work that's happened in BJA and this very grant that I'll talk a little bit about that was not offered to states until this recent CVIPI. So just a kudos to the federal government and under Director Moore's leadership for understanding that states need money too, right? But I want to honor and welcome you to my beloved city of Chicago. If you were here this morning, you heard the mayor, and of course he touted the west side, and I am born and raised on the south side, and I didn't want to up the mayor and just yell out south side, but I really wanted to. But I always like to give a historical context as a restorative justice peacekeeper. Chicago was founded by Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable, a free Black man of Haitian descent. And Chicago is the birthplace of some of the world's most brilliant ancestors, as you heard Angel lift up earlier. He talked about W.E.B. Du Bois, who right here in Chicago really cultivated brilliance and the narrative of African-American excellence. So we just want to ground us in where we are in time, space, and place, right? Our urban historian, Sherman Thomas, if you guys are on TikTok or Instagram, you'll see we have a famous urban historian who he says everything dope about America comes from Chicago. And it's that 6 degrees of separation. We're gonna go with it in Chicago because we like to take ownership of everything that's great, right? But the media, in all seriousness, portrays Chicago as a violent city. For years, we were saying per capita, we had the highest rates of violence. And as a data person, I always push back, is it really per capita or is it just that larger number, right? But there's no way to get around that. Chicago does definitely have a violence issue. And as you heard from many of the speakers and our own Jalen Arthur today, we have come up with some very innovative strategies to really address that, specifically looking at the root causes and understanding violence as a public health crisis, which it is. So today I look forward to not only sharing with you the work that we do in Illinois, but listening and learning from my counterparts. I was teasing Damon earlier that I'm a paper and pen person because I'll be up here taking notes while they're doing their presentation. So don't let me distract you with my paper flipping, right? So just to settle you with a few great things that we're doing here in Illinois. When we talk about technical assistance and capacity building, many of you were faced with an unprecedented amount of dollars through the American Rescue Plan Act Fund. Many states use those dollars to finally acknowledge the disinvestment in many of our Black and Brown communities. But when we have that level of, I would say, influx of resources coming in, it is a disservice to communities to really not give them the tools and the capacity building and technical assistance that they need to be successful, right? It is state harm, if you will, for us to say, hey, we never gave you this, but now we're gonna give you a boatload of this and do good by it, right? Without any training, any experience. And so one of the things that immediately we started to think about, how as government do we leverage this moment? And so about 3 years ago, the city of Chicago, Cook County, which is the second largest county in the United States, along with the Illinois Department of Human Services and my office, the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority, which we call ICJA. And so we all got together as a collective intergovernmental collaboration, and we have since changed our name to the Government Alliance of Safe Communities because, you know, as government, we have to have a nice acronym. We didn't pick a nice one, but it's called the GASC, right? Don't say gassy. We will stare you down. And this collaborative is unprecedented. It's something that you may not see in many places because city, county, and state typically do not play nice in the sandbox, right? There is just a lot of competition, you know, big personalities as principals. And so historically, there hasn't been tables set where these 3 levels of government really come together as we do. We literally meet weekly. As you can imagine, some of those meetings are more livelier than others, but we settled on 3 areas that we were gonna come together collectively and create strategies so that we could not only leverage the ARPA dollars that were going into community, but make sure that community organizations came out better. Right, they came out stronger. They had all of the tools that they needed to be successful beyond the ARPA dollars. And so those 3 things were data collection and evaluation, defining CVI and street outreach, right? Because that seems simple, but some organizations did not use the definition of highest risk. And if we're really gonna get to the root cause of the problem and have some impact with these dollars, we all have to be speaking the same language and targeting the highest risk of those that we know are either going to be victimized by violence or those that are going to do the perpetration. I forgot that I had slides, so sorry. And I don't know how to work this, so you guys can not see them. I don't know what to do. But anyway.
There we go.
Oh, they're out. Oh,
okay,
that's
they're
ours.
Oh, that's Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah. Technology is not my thing. Somebody might want to get this. So the Government Alliance is our huge collective approach. But the other thing that I want to share with you is in my office, we formulated an Institute to Innovate called Eye to Eye. And the Eye to Eye program was really addressing kind of what I spoke about, understanding that we're targeting grassroots organizations, which is something the state had never done before. If you wanted to have Illinois state dollars, every single notice of funding opportunity said you had to come with experience. We were now beginning to embark upon funding where we said, we know the answers to what we need is at the local level. And many of these localized organizations that are boots on the ground, doing the real work, have never had traditional dollars. They have been doing this work out of basements, out of, churches, out of their heartstrings, and not any support from government. And so Eye to Eye is really built on the premise that we have to build the muscle in our grassroots organizations to really have sustainability and effective services at the local level. And so we offer a 6-month curriculum-based approach where we take small grassroots organizations through a curriculum from A to Z of building their nonprofit, and then onboard them to state funding in a supported mechanism. So they have a grant coach that is walking hand in hand with them as they implement their grant dollars and helping them with the very complex grant administration that is the state of Illinois. So I will kind of close with just kind of sharing the importance of government coming together is a key component of building our own capacity in technical assistance, being able to leverage each other as partners and understanding where we as government can step in and provide technical assistance. Understanding relationship building is probably the first step because, to be quite frank, it's not a space government is traditionally in, and people don't trust us, right? They don't think that when we say, show us under your hood, tell us where your pain points are as an organization, that it's not going to be a got you moment, right? So kind of building that relationship, but showing up in a different way. We talked a little bit earlier about changing the narrative to say that a state agency is really your partner. We're here to make sure you're successful because our success is predicated on your success. So again, just the collaboration between government and then having a mechanism where you're really paying attention to the grassroots organizations and building that muscle in them through technical assistance and training that's really going to provide them with sustainability to come so that you can really change these community areas and have them be striving versus surviving. So I will land it there and pass it on to
And I'll pass it on to Dane.
So thank you and good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to talk from New York State perspective of how we work with our CVI work. I work for the Division of Criminal Justice Services, and I'm like, every time I say my title, I'm like, man, that's long. We need to kind of shorten that up some. And I don't want to use acronyms because I have to admit, like my background is I've worked in non-for-profits and then I started working at the state government. So now I'm like, I'm really a bureaucrat, like I'm really representing the state and I have to kind of get out of my community organizer mindset. But so part of what the Division of Criminal Justice Services does in New York State is our motto is we enhance public safety by providing resources and services that inform decision-making to improve the criminal justice services. So we do a lot of training of police officers, we do fingerprinting, we do the sexual registry is kept at our agency. But one of the things that my office does in particular is we are the only office in our agency out of 19 different offices that really focuses on community, where there's no statutory, we're not police, we're not probation, we are really community focused and driven and really about young people. So when I say I'm from New York, everybody says, well, what borough are you from? And I'm like, New York is bigger than New York City. I just want you guys to know, like, I'm not from a borough. I actually live in Westchester County. And, and so our CVI work, we call it SNUG, which is gun spelled backwards. And it's based off the cure violence model. And I'm going to take you through a little bit of history so you can understand how we got to where we are. So just so you understand, we have 14 different CVI programs that we fund throughout the state, and we fund it from as far west in the state as Buffalo, which I know Buffalo's in the house somewhere here, all the way down to Long Island, eastern Long Island. So that's about 450 miles in between. So you can understand like the distance that, New York, how big New York State is. And so in 2009, our legislator decided that they were going to put some money into community violence intervention. They were going to use the cure violence model, hired, got people from Chicago to come in, do training and some technical assistance. They funded it for about $5 million for 2 years. right? And so they said, we're gonna do 10 places, $5 million, 2 years, for 2 years, and see how it goes. Well, what happened is by year 2, because there was no support, it was just really regular business that the state does, it said, we're gonna, give you the money, then you just give us the quarterly reports like we always do. There were only 2 places standing out of the 10. And so we worked with Rochester Institute of Technology, and we said, what can we do to make this better, to make this successful? What they decided to do was there needed to be a little more oversight to help the places get to where they needed to go to. So they hired a director of SNUG. And they hired a director, which is interesting. The director of the Community Violence Initiative was a former police officer. That's who they hired. Like, okay, how's that going to work? But we understood that doing the work, the police had to be involved in some way, because the police have information, they have data, they have real time, and they, it was really to help build kind of that community between law enforcement and this work, and be able to have somebody when law enforcement said, oh, we can't give you that data, he could say, yes, you can. I've done your job for long enough, so it's government kind of working. And so we brought on about 7 more places, and I was one of those. I lived in the city, Mount Vernon, New York. That was one of the 7 places that came on. So I helped build the program there as the program director. And I guess I either did such a good job or I was very unlucky and I got a promotion, and I got to be the director of training for the state. So that meant I got to travel. So now if you ask me about New York State, I can tell you the highlights, the lowlights of any major city in New York State. I can tell you how many miles it is from here to there. I don't need a GPS. I'm very well trained in New York State. For 5 years, I went to each one of those 14 places once a month. So I know New York State extremely well. And so my job as director of training was, I worked with the Cure Violence guys, Colby and Marcus and those guys, and I would attend every training, and then I would go out into the field with the people doing the work on the ground. And I would make sure, I would say, okay, if we're gonna do a fidelity to a model, let's make sure that we're doing a fidelity to a model in each of these sites. But for me, it was a chance to get to know the people doing the work and get to know what they needed, what support they might need, and what support we might be able to help them with. And so that's really what was my job, was to come back and say, listen, our guys need this. How can we make this happen as a state? And so, like I said, I did that for 5 years, really kind of talked to everybody about it. And then year 2, they said, you know what, Damon, New York's a little different than Chicago and Cure Violence. Why don't you create a curriculum for New York State? And I said, huh? And once again, I was either lucky, or I got bad luck, or I got the greatest luck in the world. So my job was to really, then I got to travel the country. I went to LA, spent some time at the Urban Peace Institute. I went to Boston, spent some time in Boston to really kind of just talk about, like, how do you do this outreach work? How do you do CVI? How does it look in your different places? And so, really developed a curriculum there, got the chance to train people that were in the field in New York to be trainers for all the new people coming on. So, a big part of the takeaway was that, once we built that out, then it was like, okay, it's great that we have this money. We're still operating on a budget about $3.5 million. And then the pandemic hit, and we all know that gun violence spiked. And with that spike in gun violence, our governor at the time, Andrew Cuomo, said there's we called it a executive order that gun violence was an emergency. And they poured money into it. So now we expanded from $3 million to $22 million overnight. I was like, well, how are we going to do that, right? And so it's me and literally my boss doing this work, doing support and supporting the TA. And so we said, not only do we need the money for the people on the ground, we need the money to build the infrastructure. So what we did was we actually built out a team. We brought in a social work director, we brought in some social work supervisors for upstate and downstate. We brought in another director of training because I happened to get a promotion at the time. We brought in another director of training. We brought in 2 assistant directors of training. We brought in some administrative staff really to help out with the grantee. So we built the office of about 12 people just to help out with our Cure Violence or our CVI work. And really, not only did we do that, but we also put money into, like, how can we help our people? And so part of what we did was we do about 6 mandatory trainings a year. We pay for that. We don't ask for them to pay out of their budget. So we want to be able to support them that way. And then we also know that the work is traumatizing. Right? We understand that we are putting people back in situations that have caused trauma and that can trigger them to do things. And so we offer, the state pays for it, is therapy. And we we work with 2 different agencies that have connections to black male therapists, and we offer therapy for free. And we don't ask who's taking it. We just want to know how many sessions so that we can pay for those sessions. We like we said, we do healing-centered engagement training. We do trauma training. We do motivational interviewing training. And so all these trainings we pay for as a state, because we know that, not only do we want our people to have, the best of the best, but we also want them to be well-trained, because we know you can't do this forever. So our thing is, if we help our people out, then they are able to move on into the field and be able to create other positions for other people. And we're always talking about career paths. So really, as a state, what we decided to do was we give the grants out to the non-for-profits, but our focus is really helping our teams grow personally and professionally. Our commissioner always says, I want everybody to be a state employee. And we're like, hold on, commissioner, that's gonna be a lot of work. But we have created some pathways, and we have created people that have been just as involved that now work for the state, that are doing this work, that are giving back. And so really, as a state, what we saw was the best way to be able to help was really to be able to help the workforce, pour into the workforce, and really have everybody kind of speaking from the same sheet of music, but also understanding that each city, there's different things that drive each city individually. I know Syracuse is here as well, and I know there's certain things that drive violence in Syracuse that are different from what drive violence in Buffalo, which are different than drive violence in the Bronx. So we want to make sure that we're all speaking from the same sheet of music, but we also understand that, we want to lead for your individuality. And last thing I would say is that the data infrastructure, that we did build the data infrastructure. So we paid for the database that our people have. We collect the data so that we are making sure that everybody's collecting the same data, so that we can all be talking the same way and talking in data. And I will say that the work is so important on the ground that we're doing, that we couldn't even think about doing the work without taking care of the people doing the work. And, the more, our last thing, that our big push is now to actually pay for everybody to have health benefits. And we want to put that as part of our grants, so that we know that people can get what they need, because we did set a minimum salary. We don't let the non-for-profits pay them what they think they should pay them. We say, this is what you are going to pay them. We are going to give you the money to pay them, and make sure that we have all full-time workers, so nobody's doing this part-time, so that we're making sure that people have a chance to not only do the work, but also have making living wages across the state. And I'll leave it at that, and I'll go to Kerwin.
Excellent, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Kerwin Henderson again with my colleague Lori Toscano. We are West Ed. We are TA providers with the state of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, providing TA to over 270 grantees across the Commonwealth, all with different goals and objectives and missions. But it's been a pleasure working with the Commonwealth for sure. Great to be here with you all today. Doris, I'm also a Southside baby, but I'm just very South. I grew up in Central Illinois, but it's great to be back and experience the less than 24-hour weather swing that I'd moved away from. But it's great to be here and to talk a little bit about our work. Proud of the work that we're continuing to do with the Commonwealth. I want to shout out our PCCD, the Pennsylvania SAA representative that's here as well, working with Sam Cook to really kind of bring really a lot of change across the Commonwealth in terms of the work that not only the state is doing, but a lot of community-based organizations, grassroots organizations really, that they're trying to really uplift the work that they're doing. So our work mainly as TA providers for PCCD, like I mentioned, we work with over 270 different community-based organizations, but it expands beyond just CVI. We work with a number of organizations that are very focused on CVI, but other organizations that are based are focused rather on resilience, working with young children. There's a number of grantees that we work with. They implement basketball camps, and the grant structure in Pennsylvania split into 2 different tracks. There's the VIP track, which is individual community-based organizations using money to address violent crime in the communities. But then there's the Coordinated Community Violence Initiative, I always forget the I, as well, which is coordinated. So it's a lead organization with collaboration of other community-based organizations working together to address violent crime. There's 5 of those currently across the Commonwealth, 1 in Chester, Pennsylvania, 2 in Philly, 1 in York, Pennsylvania, and another 1 in Pittsburgh. And we work with them to really coordinate. You know, we talked earlier on an earlier panel about, you know, kind of what the needs are when it comes to CVI, and it's not necessarily the reducing violence. There's a lot of, you know, kind of legwork that's needed in order to get the work off the ground, and that's what a lot of our focus is when it comes to really the CCVI sites, but all the grantees that we work with across this, the Commonwealth. For us, one of our guiding principles in doing the work with not only grantees, but with the Commonwealth is co-creation, very focused on thought partnership. I think when thinking about the different target populations, all of the community-based organizations that we work with, thinking about their target populations, thinking about their needs, but also thinking about the needs of the organization, and even more broadly, the needs of the Commonwealth, you know, trying to sit down and really figure it out. And I think that's one of the better experiences that we've had with PCCD and really the state, is that they are very open, you know, to trying to figure things out, get things straight, you know, thinking about those keywords, equity, you know, and things of that nature, that they're very focused on trying to make sure that the resources get to the organizations that are on the ground and doing the work. And then letting us do what we do best, the subject matter experts, and going out and bringing in other entities. LISC is a close partner of ours on the project as well, but working with our partners to make sure that they have everything, our grantees have everything that they need to go out and do the work, but then also that they're letting them know that they're supported in the work that they do. You know, just thinking about credible messengers and things that have been said previously about, you know, just the profession in and of itself, and the lack of support sometimes and really recognition that they don't receive, making sure that we're uplifting their work and a lot of the resources that we develop. And even, you know, we joke all the time, a lot of the conversations that we have in our grantees are almost like therapists, because they have the, you know, the state requirements for reporting, but then they have the issues in their community. Then a lot of other things. I mean, there's a lot of organizations we work with that they're one-person shows, kind of trying to do all the work. So a lot of our TA calls with them are just, you know, just listening and trying to just encourage them that, you know, everything will be okay. So it's been a pleasure. When our roles really, when it comes to the work, like I mentioned, coaching, I mean, trying to help people out and kind of, for lack of a better term, talk them off the ledge when it comes to just the stress of the overall work is something that, you know, we kind of provide, and what we kind of focus on, you know, just with our personalities, I think it gives way for us to kind of just be very personable towards our grantees. But we also pride ourselves on kind of the consulting work that, you know, when we think about the work and we get into the work that we do with our grantees and with the Commonwealth, it's really kind of an open book. I mean, everything from, you know, capacity building and organizational development, thinking about KPIs and trying to help them kind of think outside of what they have to report to the Commonwealth for performance reporting, just for their organizational development, and trying to position them, put them in positions to go after additional funding, whether it be private funding, additional state funding, or federal funding. And then again, the thought partnership piece as well, you know, thinking about tools and resources, you know, and trying to think, to your point earlier about, you know, how do you define highest risk, right? You know, and you can define it in a lot of ways. And for a lot of the organizations, community-based organizations, a lot of it is very organization specific, right? In terms of their target population, what they have capacity to address, and things of that nature. So very much pride ourselves on sitting down and being those thought partners with our grantees. When it comes to the activities that we provide, obviously TA, which is very general and broad, but everything from webinars to Ask an Expert series. We have open office hours sessions, consultation, regional meetings, a lot of on-site meetings, a lot of hands-on meetings as well. So turn it over. I see 5 minutes left. I'll turn it over to Lori to cover the rest.
Because I took the exciting part. And I just have to say thanks, you know, for being here. I'm thrilled to be here. This project is probably my favorite project of my entire career. So this is, I think, 23 years in now. And when we were able to get this award from PCCD to provide the training and technical assistance, you know, we wanted to start thinking like outside of the box. You know, I have done this work at the community level, at Safe Streets Baltimore for many years, worked for Cure Violence Global for many years. And so we were trying to think about like, what was missing from all of that? You know, what are the things that like when I was a grantee, what would I have really liked to experience? And so we built, which Matt, you can flip the slide, this online learning portal, which is my favorite thing in the entire world. So papeacealliance.org, check it out. It's open to anyone. But what it is it's this opportunity for folks to be able to think about like asynchronous learning, you know, resources, which we'll flip kind of through. You can flip to resources, Matt. But even trying to think of this more broadly, right? So this online portal, when you go to the resources, there are several different categories that you can kind of like pull down and check out. You can also search by type, which I think is kind of fun because, you know, maybe you want to watch a webinar, maybe you don't want to read a report, or you want to listen to a podcast. So it has all these different kind of learning styles and all of these different resources that folks can kind of use in terms of their implementation or what they're interested in learning more about. You can flip again, Matt. My other favorite thing, I'm sorry, I have so many favorite things, I'm not gonna lie. But again, my favorite project to date. So this community page, so to Kerwin, what Kerwin was saying, so there's over 270 organizations that we're supporting right now throughout the Commonwealth. So what we did was we created this page where all of the projects are listed. So you can kind of see here, I think it's not that easy to see, but hopefully go check out papeacealliance.org. But you can see all of the organizations and you can read a summary of the work that they're doing. Then you can also search by keyword. So if I'm a violence interrupter and I want to connect with other interrupters throughout the Commonwealth, I can put in interruption, right? Or I can put in street outreach, whatever the case may be. And then I can see what other organizations PCCD has funded to do this work. And then there's this other connection piece. It also does it by location. So you could search, if I'm in Philly, I could look at all of the other Philly organizations that have been funded, see what they're doing. And then, you know, the thinking and the impetus for that was opportunities for partnership, right? If I'm a violence interrupter and I'm working with a high-risk individual or their family or just a community member and they have specific needs, well, then I can look and see who might be able to kind of fill those gaps that maybe is not the focus of my organization. You can flip again, Matt. And then the community forum is this thing that we've been trying out. To be honest, it's taken a little bit to get off the ground, but it's the idea of almost like a bulletin board. So if you want to see someone's sample policy, if you have job openings, if you have an event, whatever the case may be, you can kind of post it onto the bulletin board and other folks will see it and respond to it. There's also like kind of like a chat room kind of vibe. So folks in Philly can chat in Philly. You can also obviously go Commonwealth wide, but just another really cool thing that I think is a little bit different than what we're used to in terms of TA. And then, yeah, Matt, you can go. I know we don't have that much time, so I'm just gonna go to areas of focus. I think this is the biggest piece that I find really interesting. You know, when we set out to do this work, when I think of TA, you know, it might be how to work a violent incident, or it might be, you know, how to what's my elevator pitch, right? Or like how to write a grant, whatever the case may be. But what we're finding is that the needs are just so broad across all of these different topic areas. To be honest, this list could be tripled, right, in terms of the needs, especially when we're thinking about, you know, almost 300 organizations. There are new organizations that are being onboarded shortly. So their needs vary so greatly. So what we've been trying to figure out is, you know, what are the things that we could do regionally? What are the things that we can do almost in like a series? So like data 101, data 201, storytelling, whatever the case may be. We just kind of wanted to, for our kind of piece of this puzzle, show you a little bit of the different things that we're trying, right? That might be a little different than we've all done historically. And I think that is my time. That's my time. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you. I have a few questions for all of you. I'm sure you're not surprised by that. Lori, when you were talking about your favorites, I couldn't help but think about my youngest son, Cam, when he was about 7. He told my wife she was his favorite.
Oh, you're still thinking about that, huh? I feel it. I feel that.
But he also told my daughter that she was his favorite. And the next time, a little bit of time passes, he tells my daughter again, "You're my favorite." And she responded, "Are you sure?" And he goes, "Yes. Wait, who have you been talking to?" So I have a few questions, and having listened to all of you talk, I actually have added to my list of questions. I'm going to start with this. So I hope everyone warned you that I rarely stay on script. But I'm, since governing and government is so much, it's about decision-making and priority setting, and then deciding what resources you're going to put into place. How did this get to the point where it became a priority for you all to make investments in?
Yeah, so for Illinois, under my leadership, you all have probably heard me speak or heard my podcast or whatever I have. Equity is at the center of everything, right? And when we talk about equity, one thing I think that we're seeing in this country, that people are talking about it as a deficit, right? And it is not a deficit. It is a disinvestment. It is sort of like sending a child who was in a school in an urban city with no science lab, giving them a scholarship to Yale and expecting them to compete with kids who had full-fledged science labs, right? It's just giving folks what they need so that they can reach their fullest potential, not just as an individual, but as an institution, as a organization. And so as a government entity, we do a lot of work around equity, but also restorative practices. And we did not want to create more harm by feeding into the narrative of these people don't know how to work with this money. These people don't deserve this money if we don't equip them with the abilities and the tools that they need to be successful. It is nothing different from what we provided other organizations throughout time. When, if you think about victims, VOCA dollars, right? Victims of crime. There was a lot of technical assistance that was provided by the government. These were new agencies 25, 30 years ago. No one questioned the amount of training and support that we gave them. It should not be any different with violence prevention programs and the nuances of violence prevention programs. I think the difficulty in every area, including research, is that every community is different, every incident is different, so it's very hard to create a model, right? And we love that. Government loves a good model. And because we couldn't really wrap a bow around violence, because it's nuanced, it changes every day, we put it to the side. We said, we can't deal with this, we don't know what it is, we didn't invest in it. And now, as a public health crisis, as an epidemic, as a pandemic, we were faced with it and we had no choice but to figure it out. And I think that's how we got to it as a priority.
Thank you.
I know for us, it was really our leadership, right? The commissioner of the agency saw gun violence as a priority. And at the time, he's the former commissioner, he's a prosecutor. And so he had saw the damage that gun violence had done, and he understood that you couldn't arrest your way out of it, right? And so there had to be some other way to address violence. And so part of, what we did was we understood that, I'm gonna steal some of your stuff, right? Is that we just couldn't give you money and say, go do it. We knew that we needed to support. And as we built out our state team, we understood that not only did we need to support the non-for-profits, we needed to support the people on the ground. And the best way to be able to support the people on the ground was to have them at the table. So we would go out and we would ask, what is it that you need? How can we help you? And that way we're able to build out not only for the non-for-profits, but for the people doing the work. Because even if we gave the non-for-profits all the all the support in the world they needed, the people who actually were doing the work were going to be left out that conversation. So we wanted to make sure that those people had a chance to have a voice at the table. And with my background being a social worker and having worked in the field before, understanding that those were the most important voices to have at the table. And we really were able to push. And then our new commissioner came in, and she was a very community-driven, community-centric, and understood, like, I get it. How can we get more money? How can we get more support? How can we get more things to the people on the ground so that they can do the life-saving work that they're doing?
Thank you.
And I would say for us, this is definitely a Sam Cooke question. But what I will say is, I think what has really impressed us about Pennsylvania, and particularly the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, is this idea of co-creation, right? Of figuring out what support looks like, but doing that with the grantees themselves. So everything that we've built has been with the grantees, right? What do they want? What do they need? How can we better support them, right? That list that we had, thinking about all of the different areas, we're not being prescriptive in what the TA is. I mean, I have made flyers for folks, right? We've done systems mapping with others. We've done like review of all of their data collection tools and made recommendations, but everything is more in the sense of like peer learning and partnership. So building out this community of practice, making sure that folks have this connection to others that are doing this work, and really trying to create an environment of transparency and like this space where people can be open and honest about what is and what isn't working. And PCCD being very responsive to that. I mean, they're thinking about, how do they improve their solicitations, so that it's an easier process for the grantees or prospective grantees to go through, right? So they've been thinking about that. They've been thinking about how they can fund the TA so that the other organizations can use those dollars to pay their staff, pay them well, and use those dollars how they want, right? So everything that they're doing around TA is really like the icing on the cake. How else can we help you? How can we get you connected to the right people? How can we get you connected to each other? So it's been really impressive to see what Pennsylvania is trying to build. And all of that is based on the investment. And I think there's just a lot of really smart, well-intentioned, well-meaning, community-led, community-driven, hyper-community focused individuals who recognize that the real experts in Pennsylvania are the people that are doing this work, and how do we build it with people instead of just being like, here's the prescription for what we're going to deliver. We want you to be able to respond appropriately to your fiscal reports or your programmatic reports. This is really way more about the work than what I've seen historically.
And I'll just briefly add, I think for Pennsylvania, I think grasping the paradigm shift, right? And seeing how, things were going, how things were moving, and trying to not only address the need, but, stay not even just on trend, but trying to address the need. And I think it even, comes down even from the governor's office. We were just in Harrisburg 2 weeks ago, I think, and the lieutenant governor showed up and met with, PCCD grantees to one, show them that, he was supporting the work that they did, but then to also, offer up, even offering to show up to some of their sites and say, hey, next time you have an event, let me know and I'll be here. I think which is significant for, I think state government to be able to show that type of support directly to community-based organizations on the ground doing the work, so.
All right. Del Reese, I have a question for you. Can you tell us more about the Eye to Eye program?
Sure, and I'll keep it short because I could talk about Eye to Eye for like 3 years straight. But Eye to Eye is our capacity building arm in ICEJA. And so we are doing community-centered workshops, webinars. We have something in the state of Illinois called GATA. It's the Grants Accountability and Transparency Act. It came about, from something unfortunate where misuse of funds around another big federal fund that came down in I believe it was 2016. And because of that, we put in a lot of compliance. It's called GATA. It mirrors the feds to a T. So if you have state of Illinois dollars, you can apply for federal dollars because you know how to administer those. And anybody who's had federal dollars know how compliance driven those grants are. And so you're having groups with no infrastructure, no back office, right? You're having someone who just has the heartstrings of wanting to help kids run a program, and now they are faced with compliance of a state grant. What we were finding is that groups were very quickly getting into trouble. And it was very harmful from our perspective, right? Because now you're out of business before you even got in business. And not only are you out of business with our agency, you're out of business with the state and the feds, right? So Eye is really it's capacity building and very similar to what Pennsylvania described. It is community centered and driven. We have coaches that are assigned to groups that have state funding and find themselves in challenging situations. So before they even get in trouble, we are able to assign them to a coach. So it's very similar. I describe it on one of our NCJA podcasts as a sort of a social work approach where, you know, you need an intensive engagement around grant administration. So that's what it is. It also is an opportunity for groups who have never had state funding because they just weren't good grant writers, or they didn't have anyone to help them understand the process of getting state funding. They can go through this process of building their organization, organizational development, infrastructure, back office, and then again, onboarded to funding. So it is a very comprehensive approach. We call it our parlor approach. You can go to eye-to-eye.illinois.gov and kind of check it out. But it is a very deep, comprehensive approach to helping localize those hyper-local grassroots organizations really be successful in state grant administration.
Damon, you've built an in-house TA structure for over 10 years. What advice would you give to states who are just now going through this process?
I would say, when you're giving money out, make sure that you have the structure to do it, right? Like, because it's easy to say, here's $10 million going out to the field, but then there's no back office support at the state level. I mean, for us, we give money to hospitals. We have a hospital network. We have somebody that's in charge of kind of making sure that our hospitals are working together and we're all talking the same language. So really, anything that you're funding as a state, we should have some back office support. So if we're gonna open 10 new programs, then we probably need to, at the state level, have 2 or 3 people to help administer, because we understand that the support, especially doing this work, is necessary. So it's not about just funding places, it's about actually being able to support them with kind of the state backing there.
All right, for Kerwin and Lori, you guys can go in whichever order you'd like. Can you share some examples of what Pennsylvania has done the best at? And let's say where perhaps they have the most potential for growth in developing a CVI infrastructure?
Ooh, do you want to take one or do you want to do both?
I'll take one. I'll let you start.
Oh, you let me start?
Yeah, I'll let you start.
Oh, gosh. What they've done well, I mean, I honestly think, you know, allotting all of these dollars to TA is a step in the right direction. I don't know a lot of states that are doing it at this level. So I think being aware that they need to bring other folks to the table to help support this work, I think that's huge. The other thing I think that's really cool that they're doing, I know I mentioned, you know, they're thinking about the grant making process and the proposal process. Right now, they are using SurveyMonkey as like the initial step instead of going through like their e-grant system. So making it more accessible and easier for folks. I think that's super cool. They are, this idea that Kerwin mentioned briefly, the coordinated community violence initiatives, I think are really interesting because, you know, you have this one partner, you have this lead organization that has to bring in multiple partners to think about how they're building out like a systems response to this work. So it's really giving people the opportunity to kind of tear down those silos and those walls and think about, I know that maybe we've been in competition historically, like in Philadelphia or in Chester, in Pittsburgh, but like, let's all partner and figure this out together because there's more power in us going in together. Honestly, I could go on and on about those things. What would you say too about their best things? And Sam and her staff are phenomenal.
Yes, phenomenal to work with.
Phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah, so much. I mean, just even for the foresight in working with a lot of these community-based organizations, you know, understanding that it's a significant investment, but It's not necessarily rigid in terms of not, I want to say requirements, but just in terms of like our TA or our approach or the support for them, that, to Lori's point, it's kind of everything that the community-based organizations that we work with, it's not been prescriptive. It's very much been, let's sit down, let's map this out, and let's figure out a way forward with planning. Even if it takes you a little while to get through planning before implementation, let's get it right before actually getting into everything. I would say it's definitely a positive. Because a lot of the state funds that have been pushed out through PCCD have gotten to some community-based organizations that, otherwise wouldn't have never been supported by, a state entity, which is a positive, so.
Yeah, I would say the biggest challenge, and I think this is not Pennsylvania specific, but I think, when you're a state agency and you're funding organizations, and then you have cities that are funding organizations, and then you have counties that are funding organizations, right? So thinking about, who's funding what, is it duplicative? Is there more opportunities for partnership? What are the things that we need to be aware of? Because, having been in this space for quite some time, historically, it's been very competitive, right? Like we've been in competition with each other, in the same neighborhood, in the same city, in the same area. So when you think about all of these different funders, there's some challenges with that when you receive funding from those multiple sources, and making sure that you're getting the funding to do this specific thing, and this is for this specific thing, and it's, neither the twain shall meet kind of thing. So I think that's a challenge that I would say that most jurisdictions are probably facing. And I know, with PCCD, they're thinking about that. What does that look like in terms of the conversations with their city and county counterparts? But I think that's a big hill that we're kind of working through now.
All right, so I'm going to ask one last question, and then I'm going to turn it over to the audience to have an opportunity to ask questions. So start thinking about what you'd like to ask. But this this question is for the entire team here. Man, I've been standing around Eddie too long. What do we as the federal government, what do we need to do better in order to support CVI? All right, well, you all might get to
More
ask a
money.
question. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's very simple, just more dollars into technical assistance and capacity building. We're asking our legislators for it. They don't quite understand it because it doesn't translate to programming or the outcomes that they are looking for. So I think federal support is needed.
From my perspective, I think the federal government has to start recognizing CVI as a profession, right? Because if I say I'm a lawyer, you know what a lawyer is. If I say I'm a social worker, you know what a social worker is. If I say I'm a CVI worker, you might not know what that is. And these people are out there doing great work. And so how do we start to professionalize the field? And what does the field look like a professional CVI worker? So I think from the federal government's perspective, if we can start thinking about how do we professionalize the field so that it's not just a passing thing, right? It's not, it goes past administrations and it's here to stay. It becomes part of the fabric of what happens in communities.
I think just in terms of looking at outcomes, measuring outcomes, realizing that it's more than just the reduction in shootings and killings, right? There's a lot of stories, there's a lot of information. I mean, the panel earlier kind of talked about, the data and metrics and the importance of numbers and whether numbers, having numbers was the only measure you should look at. I think from the federal government's perspective, capturing that additional information, because not every CVI program looks the same, and not everyone's implementing CVI the same, not everybody's capturing the same information, but trying to focus, a little bit more broadly on some of those stories, some of those other metrics, some of those positive things that are happening in communities, and for the families of those that are affected as well. I think capturing that information, even from a performance standpoint, I think would help.
Yeah, I would echo all of that. I think the other thing too is maybe around messaging, right? Like, I think that we've had to fight for our space in this work, right? In violence prevention, community violence interventionists specifically, frontline staff, people that are, in community have been doing this for decades and decades. And I feel like a lot of the times we have to kind of justify it, right? Justify what it means to be a credible messenger, explain what that means. get the support needed for folks in that space. And I think, you know, the federal government has moved like leaps and bounds in the right direction with that, but I still feel like we're fighting for credibility in this space. And so anything that can be done to legitimize this even further, I think is always welcome.
All right, thank you. Oh, wow, we've got a person right here. I was about to say if you have a question, but. I don't have a question. Oh, okay.
I have another hour for that.
More ideas.
But I think similar to other fields, and intimate partner violence comes to mind. I think that the federal government needs to understand how transitional this process is, that people need in order to be successful: basic human needs, housing, food, utilities. I know in the state of Illinois, we're looking at the victim witness relocation services for the future to really truly, you know, be able to access from a legal standpoint violent people, but then also to help people start lives over and really transition and break the cycle. Oh, I'm from Illinois. I see you.
Yay.
All right. Well, we appreciate, I mean, I can tell you're a very shy person, so I appreciate you taking the initiative. Got another question over here, and then we'll go over there.
Actually, I wanted to address your question. What more can the federal government do?
All right. Okay.
That's a popular question. My name is Deborah Anderson. I'm with Alameda County Probation Department. And it's more adding to what Kerwin was saying about measuring outcomes, because sometimes, you know, you ask, was this person successful or did they not complete the program? They may not have completed the entire program, but they had milestones that they met. For example, they reunited with their kids. You know, they're great successes that they made, but then something happened that they quit, you know? And so there's no way for us to measure that, especially in reporting. You know, it's just how many people. So that would be awesome for us to be able to have a tool where we're able to relay that information.
Do you keep that type of information?
So I have really been pushing for the for our vendors who do the program, the CBOs, to record that. So in their monthly report, I am asking not only how many people completed, but how many reunited with their kids, how many started visitation while they're incarcerated. So different milestones I've set up so that we can keep track of.
I think that's a really great point. And so I'm a baseball geek, and I know people get tired of me talking about baseball, but clearly it doesn't matter to me that they do. But the great thing that I see in baseball, and one of the reasons why I bring it up so much in talking about criminal justice, is that baseball used to just measure a very small number of things, and they judged whether or not someone had value based on 3 simple data points. If you were a hitter, it was RBIs, home runs, and batting average. That was it. And now you look today and they track all types of things, because there was a guy who came along and said, no, there's hidden value here that you are not measuring, and it's impacting the game, and it's allowing some people to be incredibly successful, and you're not capturing it. So I would just urge, and the thing that I think is most important about that is that that was not a change that Major League Baseball commissioned. It came from the field. People in the field decided you need to see value in a different way. And so I would urge you to think about those things and to make sure that you're capturing those, and then that you can share those with us. All right, so we got a question over here.
My name is Atlanta Ellington. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I work at a local nonprofit agency, Heal 901 in Memphis. And to piggyback off of the point of data, when we're talking about these credible advocates and messengers, a lot of them come from a varying amount of backgrounds, right? And we're speaking about capturing data. I was just going to inquire if anyone had like a baseline of data points that you feel like need to be included in these things, because there are so many different models that each organization works through and with. And that's some feedback that we've gotten as well. Is like, oh, well, you had these metrics of data, but we needed an activity log. Or you were using, I don't know, Apple numbers, and we need you to have it in Excel and upload it and figure out how to do that. What would be a generalized baseline, especially for the individuals that we touch? To the young lady over here's point, we do have additional milestones that aren't naturally metrics that are typically looked at. But I would like to know from each of you, what do you think are really great baselines? And for those of you who are in tech, what would be some good data points or databases to start with if you're a grassroots organization and you're starting up?
Look, everybody's scared to answer that, like. Yeah. So database-wise, we built our own. We met with different designers and we built our own so that we, but that's costly. So I'm not gonna even suggest that for a smaller not-for-profit, but we're a state agency, so we could do it that way. But when I think of data points, right, like I think of different things, like how much did that person's social interactions change, right? Because if that person is at the highest risk, that means they're probably a leader in whatever group they're in. So if we can start talking about changing that leader's mindset, that leader's gonna have an effect on the group or the gang that they're involved with. So, how do we measure that? Or are we capturing that, right? Like, how much more involvement, and I've heard it here, like with your family, because a lot of times, or is school something, right? Like, or have you gone back to get some type of education, whether it's vocational, whether it's formal, or whether it's something else, right? Do you look at, what does work look like to you, right? And it could be entrepreneurship, because in today's age, entrepreneurship is huge because they got YouTube and social media and different things. So really capturing those type of things that shows that a person is starting to change or starting to think about changing.
I wanted Damon to go first because they have like a real system. So I talked a little bit about our government alliance. We have a shared tool that we all put together through community voice. So we created the community of practice and had many sessions with CVI providers and said, what is it that you want to capture? What are the data points and story narrative and numbers that would show success? And really had a lot of brainstorming around that with the help of some of the research partners that we have, so that we could all sort of have a baseline of what those measures would be. We can share those. We're happy to kind of share that work. It's unfolding. And we do believe those metrics will change, right? There were some state agencies that said, it's not enough individualized data with what we all agreed upon. So we said, well, fine, you go for some similar to Director Moore, like you continue to capture that, but here's at a baseline what metrics we all will agree are important and create outcomes. And then people started adding what they need for their community area. What do you want me to, yeah.
I think that there's like a lot of the standard ones, right? Like number of conflict mediations, number of mediations that could have led to violence had it not, right? Like all that kind of thing. But one of the things that we're starting to look at with the grantees too is like, what is it that you're trying to achieve? Like, is it behavior changed? Is it increased resiliency? Is it social emotional learning? Is it, right? And so thinking about kind of those things, and then what are the assessment tools that might be available. A lot of the folks at like West Ed and our research and evaluation on our side of things have really also been talking to the grantees about like, it's okay to look at assessment tools and kind of pick and choose some, right? And figure out what works for you. But I think historically we're trying to like show a reduction in shootings and killings, but what are the tools that we're giving people, right? And the behavior change piece, I think is hard. But I do think that there's some cool things that we could be doing in that space, and we would be happy to share kind of what we're working on too with you. Yeah.
Recovering business consultants, very much when it comes to like organizational development was like pounded into my head. I was at KPMG for a little over a year. But taking a lesson learned from that, I mean, a lot, you talked about a baseline when it comes to metrics, a lot of that is derived from like your mission and vision statement, right? Just thinking about what's your set set to do as an organization, and then thinking about metrics in that sense. And then from there, starting to organize those and think about other metrics, whether they're outputs or whether they're performance indicators or anything of that nature, and trying to organize it, I think is the best way to go. But like starting as a baseline, focusing on what is your mission, right? What do you set out to do as an organization? For us and our grantees and how we've been providing TA and talking about it is that it's kind of layered because they're funded by a state organization that has a mission, but then they have their individual missions too. And then for the coordinated sites, they all have their missions and visions as well. So trying to think about in a systematic way all of the different metrics as a baseline to start with there, start there. And there's one site in particular that we work with that actually brought in a data consultant to start thinking about and visualizing a lot of the data and metrics that they're collecting in a dashboard. So, but yeah, I think as a baseline, starting just with your mission and vision statement and starting to think from there and then building out from there, I think is a good start. So.
Oh, and I should also say on that kind of like bulletin board software that we have, there was a conversation around systems. So we can send you that too. We can talk offline after that and give you kind of the list that people were saying that they liked.
All right, well, that was a great question. And I think, it makes me think about kind of the theme throughout today has been around storytelling. And what we're really talking about is how do we collect data that allows us to tell the full story? So I appreciate those last two questions that were very much connected. And all of the participation here today. I do want to note, while the Attorney General announced that there are a couple of our solicitations around CVI that have been released today, we do have another solicitation that will be released later on. That's the BJA FY24 Training and Technical Assistance for Justice Focused Community-Based Organizations. It will offer TTA focusing on CBOs in historically marginalized and underserved communities. And the great thing about the TTA is you do not have to be a grantee in order to receive the training and technical assistance. Well, I hope you have enjoyed this panel as much as I have. Please join me in thanking our incredible panelists.